Tēnā koutou e ngā iwi oroto I te motu o honu. Tatu atu kia koutou olone ngā iwi take o tēnā whenua tēnei te mihi atu o Aotearoa kia koutou, tika Māui kia koutou. Ka tangihia o tātou mate, rātou kia rātou, tātou kia tātou, o rātou waha kōrero, o rātou kanohi ora. Firstly, greetings from the land that we call Maui's Fish, to Turtle Island, and particularly to what we call the mana whenua, the Indigenous people of that place, the Olone. I bring my greetings to you all. And in greeting you, I remember our many ancestors that have fallen on your side and on my side. We take a moment to grieve for them and ask that even if we cannot be together in one place, at least they can be my ancestors to yours. Because if they are joined, since we are nothing but their speaking mouths and their living faces, then we too are joined. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you in San Jose. Unfortunately, I've got a day job which I can't get leave from, otherwise I would have been there with you, but it's a pleasure to be able to address you at such a significant event as the Bloom 23 event. Apparently I've got 10 minutes to convince you of my messages, so this is kind of biodiversity speed dating, and I'll do my best, but I haven't had a lot of luck with that, so bear with me. Actually, I should tell you, I'm a judge. I'm a judge on the New Zealand Supreme Court, so I think like a lawyer. And when I think about issues of biodiversity, I think about those issues like an Indigenous lawyer. So let's start with the law. So the basic ideas are that you are autonomous, and unless you commit a crime, and you can control your relationships as you wish, and you have control of the environment, of the planet, or as you're calling it at this conference, nature. Well, that imagination means the world is ruled by humans who are maximally free to the extent consistent with the idea of human society and community. That's why when you talk about the planet, you use the term nature, because you imagine nature as something different to you. Nature is other, and you are abstracted from it, above it, and you control it. This idea somehow that humans, because they are gods, aren't part of the game, they just control it. That sounds a bit dark, I know, but actually when you look at the basic precepts of the law, that seems to be a pretty accurate description. When you think about it, that description is a little problematic. So let me talk to you about another form of imagining. I'm a Polynesian from the bottom of the Polynesian Triangle, an island called Te Ika Maui, or the Fish of Maui, one of 3 islands of my home country of Aotearoa, which you'll know as New Zealand. The northern end of Polynesia is actually part of your country, Hawaii. The eastern end of Polynesia is Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, as you'll probably know it as. And in the middle, of the base of the arrowhead, is Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji. The imagining within that triangle, and this is consistent with the imaginings of Indigenous people all over the planet, I think, an idea I'm going to come back to, is not like that at all. Here is how my culture imagines humans and the planet. Ranginui is the Sky Father. His spouse is Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother. Their eldest child is Tāne, the god of the forest, but he has a lot of names. Tāne Mahuta, Tāne the great tree. Tāne te Waiora, Tāne of the life-giving water. Tāne te Wānanga, the keeper of knowledge. I'm telling you this brief story because the great imagining in my culture is kinship. everything is related. So according to this genealogy, let me give you another line, Tāne married Hinetitama. And in that union from that union came the first humans. After the trees, after the water. So my imagining is that the humans and the trees are closely related. Ironically, the scientists now agree about 20% or 25% of the DNA of trees is the same as our DNA. So it follows, even for you Enlightenment Westerners, that the trees and us share a common ancestor. The other thing about this imagining where the sky is an ancestor and the earth is an ancestor is that all is alive. There's no such thing as the organic and the inorganic. Everything is organic. Everything has, in my culture, what's called Māori. And the best way to describe it is that sound your fridge makes, that low hum that tells you this thing is alive. Papatuanuku, the earth, has Māori. She's alive. Her descendants, the rocks, I could give you the genealogy down to Rakahore. There are literally millions of names, all hum, and all is related. So it doesn't make sense to speak of nature, because that would be like speaking of your leg as being different to you, or speaking of your grandmother as if she were a stranger. Now, in my experience, Indigenous people all over the world imagine the world in this kind of way. Of course, there are differences, sometimes quite strong differences, but the basic idea that we aren't separate from reality, we aren't gods, we are cogs in a living ecosystem, living not just those things that the Westerners call organic, but an entirely alive planet, is common across Indigenous people. The reason I've walked you through this is that in my country over the last 15 years or so, there's been something of a reawakening of this, a remembering of this idea. Firstly, in respect of the Waikato River, which is kind of our version of the Mississippi, much smaller, but the biggest and busiest used river in the country. The administration of the river was, in 2010, vested in a joint kind of entity between the state, which we call the Crown, and the local tribes. And then in 2014, one of our most pristine forests, the Urewera forest, was granted legal personality and run thereafter by a joint board of what we call the mana whenua, the people of the land, and the state, the Crown. And then 3 years later in 2017, the second biggest river, the Whanganui, often called Te Awa Tupua, the mystical or the magical river, was also granted legal personality and a whole new form of administration built around it, which included all stakeholders brilliantly, because the local tribe said, we can't run this thing alone. We need the farmers, we need the tourism operators, we need the local authority, we need central government to develop the strategy, because if we do it by ourselves, we will just generate conflict. But the key, the core idea was this river is alive, from the mountains to the sea. Well, so what? So the Māoris, or the Indigenous people, counter-colonize the minds and the imaginings of the colonizers and start to remind them that they are not the gods, they are not the masters, and nature is not nature. Conservation is a swear word. That we live in the earth. We are part of the earth. We are the cousins to the trees and the birds, not in some kind of romantic green way, but actually in our law. So we managed to convince the settlers that, maybe they could start thinking like that too. What's so significant about that? Is that just a local New Zealand thing, or does it have broader significance? Well, the so what I think is this: 40% of the surviving intact ecosystems on the planet are occupied by Indigenous peoples who share these imaginings. That's why those ecosystems are intact. If that were not the case, they would be shaved bare, just like the ecosystems that you live in. The Amazon, the Northern Boreal, the Southwest Pacific, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, the Solomons, Sub-Saharan West Africa. These are the places where the great forests are, all of them occupied and administered either legally or extra-legally by Indigenous peoples whose imaginings are like the imaginings that I just described to you. These imaginings are saving the planet, and therefore they're saving you. In New Zealand, this modest outcome of the counter-colonization, not just in the law of my country, but in the imaginings of its people, brown or white, shows that this can work. It has to. So I invite you to reimagine your relationship with the planet, and in your businesses and in your lives, join forces with Te Olone, with the Indigenous peoples wherever you are, and counter-colonize yourself. Tēnā koutou katoa.